is there any way that
Greetings and welcome to Lansing Online News Radio here at WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing. I am Bonnie Buckaroo and I'm soon going to be joined by my co-host Bill Castanier. Every Monday night at 7 o'clock, Lansing Online News Radio comes to you from WLNZ and it's webcast at the same time on our website, www.lansingonlinenews.com. Bill, I was going to ask you first, you've been doing some reviewing of a book about millennials.
Millennials, the next great threat
to
baby boomers.
Excuse me, want to take away our Social Security?
We want to take away, no, I'm just joking there. But millennials first, let's get it clear. They're born between 1982 and 2003.
Oh,
so that's 21 years. The reason I reviewed this book, it's called Millennial Momentum, is they are the next major generation to move through the cycle.
As we begin to die off, we boomers, they're going to take over?
Absolutely. Well, this next election, 60% of the millennials will be able to vote. And that's 95,000 millennials.
Oh.
So
here in Michigan or 95?
No, nationwide. Nationwide.
Only 95,000?
Million. Did I say? Oh, excuse me. 95 million millennials in the country. 60% will be able to vote this next election. The two authors of this book, Morley Winograd, who you might remember was the head of the State Democratic Party about 3 decades ago.
Famous name in Michigan.
And Michael D. Haas predicted the 2008 election. They said millennials would pull the trigger on it, and they did. They turned that election, and primarily because of new social media.
What do they think they're going to do this time?
I wish they could say more clearly. If millennials vote, the vast majority of millennials identify with Democrats.
Or their values.
Yep, their values. At this time. Now, as they grow older, that might change. One of the things that might make it change is if there's a prolonged recession. They might get more conservative. But this generation, when you compare it to previous generations, and there's cycles of this that happen every 80 years, this generation is what is called a civic generation, one that is committed to government, to doing things socially, much like the greater generation after World War II generation. It was a very civic generation. They built things. They had built government. This generation could be the next civil generation. There are things that can derail that, but I think as we were talking this afternoon, that one thing they do not take account for in their book, which is called Millennial Momentum, is that I think a small, well-organized, and wealthy group can control a very large group, like we're seeing right now.
Right, absolutely. The 1% having power over the 99%. But that sort of fits with what I've been reading. Adbusters, as you know, was the group that started the Occupy movement. They were the ones who came up with the original idea, put the ad in Adbusters magazine. And I just got my new issue, and I was reading in there that they're talking about the post-cool generation. That there were the previous generations, the world we sort of had lived in, the one that was really began with the baby boomers. People worried a lot about being cool, about looking right, about wearing the latest fashions. A lot of it was built around a sort of materialist and consumer individuality. And this is arguing that there's a big cultural shift underway right now with this whole Occupy movement, and it's saying instead, let's be more earnest, let's dump irony, let's not start worry so much about what we're putting on our backs, let's worry about what we're filling our heads with, and let's start working on community. And so it fits with what you're saying.
It fits with that, and I think there's a lot of people talking about that. And what's interesting is 40% of millennials are mixed. They're generally African American, Latino, Asian, or mixed race.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first time that's ever happened in any of these cycles.
They're going to be a much larger voting bloc. Will the time get larger and larger?
Yes, absolutely. Let me give you this number. By 2012, they're going to be 1/4 of all the voters already.
Wow.
So they can have a huge impact. The question is who gets them out to vote and who really gets control of this group. You're already seeing it in consumer things. They are already the target for movies.
Oh yeah.
I mean, consumer objects are way ahead of the political world.
one of the things that the Adbusters article warned against was that so many of the ad campaigns now are designed to hide the corporate roots of various campaigns and find ways to manipulate people. The things using labels like organic and natural and all this kind of thing, when the product is still being made by a major industrial food producer, but they open up you'll never find that food producer's name on the website because it's going to be that they're trying to market to you through that. So let's hope it doesn't just become another sloganeering campaign of young people being manipulated.
I hope it doesn't. This seems to be the next great hope in this country. Every 80 years, there's a big swing. And this is the big swing this generation moving through that can return us to an era of civic responsibility, they say.
Well, one of the challenges, as we were talking about, though, is that the entrenched power structure isn't going to give up easily, are they?
No, and they've got the money.
Well,
money buys ads, and money buys lots of influence and power.
Money just made pizza a vegetable.
Yeah, right. Of course, it was homemade, so I guess it could have been vegetable, but I saw that. It's like ketchup.
Absolutely. What happens is that actually, it was quite a good show last night on The Good Wife. That's a series that's on television that was talking about food lobbyists in a fictional setting. Back when I used to work at Michigan Farmer Magazine, we would be inundated with news releases from various food marketing groups and food promotion groups, whether it was the cattlemen or whether it was the sugar producers, sugar beet producers, all of these different groups. And they have enormous power in Washington at the committee level to be able to get standards changed. I think what really bothers me, and I guess when we were talking about manipulation, is I have seen some of the entrenched ad groups, for example, try to persuade people that Michelle Obama's attempts to improve the diet in schools as a way of dealing with childhood obesity, they've been demonizing her. They've been treating her as the enemy, and how she's part of the nanny state coming to control us. And really what they are is they're backed by corporate interests who want to keep pizza as a vegetable. And they don't want to have those nice leafy greens because apparently the leafy green people haven't been able to cough up the...
Can't make as much money selling leafy greens.
Apparently not.
Because you can grow them in your backyard pretty easily.
I know. So it's a real challenge in this era to sort of tease out.
I think that goes back to that millennial whole strategy. Is who has the money?
Right.
I think that's one thing like they did not take into account. That I think they can swing things different ways through advertising.
I've been reading so often, for example, that they're talking about how as minorities become the majority in the culture, that it will see this huge power shift. But if we look at it historically, countries like South Africa, at the time that apartheid was imposed, the ratio was 4 Africans to every Dutch down there, and yet the Dutch were able to maintain power. It's how much money and clout you have, and not just sheer numbers. So that's going to be part of the challenge. The millennials are growing in power in terms of numbers, but will they be able to wrest power from the people who already have it open inside the lives?
Unfortunately, I don't think you know it until you're well through it. So.
Well, we saw a little bit, Bill. I think maybe one of the most disturbing stories I'd like to spend a minute or two talking about is the story that comes out of the University of California at Davis, where a group of peaceful college students exercising their First Amendment right to protest not only the 1%, but also the horrific tuition raises that are coming over the next 3 years in the California university system. They were seated quietly. They weren't causing anybody any trouble. They weren't yelling at anybody. They weren't throwing bottles. And we watched 2 police officers on campus come with what is military-grade pepper spray, large canisters, and it didn't just spray a little spray. I mean, they doused these students with this horrific blistering agent. 2 of them ended up in the hospital. This is the kind of agent that is only supposed to be used from 15 to 20 feet away. They were right up on top of these kids, soaking them with this stuff. If you have asthma, it's potentially lethal. I really never thought we would see this in a college campus in the United States.
I thought those days were over. I really did. And that was possibly one of the most passive groups I've ever seen. Both the kids that were getting sprayed and the ones that were watching had their arms folded.
Yeah.
They were not aggressive.
No.
I was thinking another time, another place, I would have been very aggressive. They were doing some pretty horrendous things.
And then I guess what really bothered me, and I don't know if you knew, but I have started, as always, yet another blog. This one is called occupyjournalism.wordpress.com. And I was extraordinarily upset the next day when I saw the way in which the story was reported, because rather than talk to any of the students, the AP and the LA Times. The AP account was in Washington Post and New York Times, and the LA Times did their own story. All they did was quote from the chancellor's self-serving announcement that she made, and a couple quotes from Annette Spacuzzo, who was the police chief on campus, all just saying officers did the right thing, they were concerned about their safety. Here you saw these big burly guys in riot gear, and my attitude is, if those officers felt, that threatened, what wussies they are. I mean, my goodness, they're supposed to help me if I've got a rapist coming in the door. They can't handle a bunch of seated college kids that are just sitting there silently. I mean, it was bizarre, and I thought the media really ended up with a black eye for its failure, number one, to say what was clearly visible in the video, and number two, to go out and find some of those students to talk to.
Yeah, I agree. And today the chancellor had a backpedal on this because
and the police chief is
on
leave.
Was on leave. So there was no pay in doing that. Tell the truth.
Right.
Tell the truth. That was a terrible thing to do.
The quickest way for the media to lose credibility is to embed a video that people watch and are horrified, and then read the media account around it that seems to be justifying it somehow.
I kept looking for the aggressive attitude of these kids. There was none. Like I said, it's the most passive group I've ever seen.
I'm just surprised that the kids behind them didn't go for the cops.
Oh, me too. I'm glad I'm not in a position like that because I couldn't stop myself not being arrested.
Yeah, just to protect their peers.
That was really self-defense.
One of the things I would like to talk about is that with my background in working as a police consultant for many years, I was very concerned. A good friend of mine down in D.C. took a job where one of his jobs was to take military innovations and mainstream them into domestic police agencies. Wikipedia has a very interesting account of how this military-grade pepper spray got ever into the hands of domestic police, and it never should have. In fact, the man who appears to have faked some of the tests that resulted in doing that did 2 months in jail for the fraud that he committed. He was an FBI agent that was faking the data because he felt it was such a great idea. This idea that these non-lethal weapons, what's happened is they were only supposed to be used in cases where you would normally use a gun. If you wouldn't use a gun to shoot somebody, then you weren't supposed to use these non-lethal weapons. They were considered as a safer alternative for all involved in cases where using a gun might mean that a stray bullet would kill the bystander. So instead you would use pepper spray or you would use a taser unit in order to be able to take somebody down without having to use lethal force. But it was supposed to be that the standard was you didn't use it unless you were in a situation where you really did feel your life was threatened. What we're seeing now, however, is that police agencies, it's changing so quickly, where they're using these as crowd control. I mean, in the days previously where they just would have gone in and grabbed somebody and hauled them away in handcuffs, they're now coming in with tasers and pepper spray and things that do have a record of killing people.
I hope that enough people will watch that video that these kinds of things will end.
I think it certainly energized the movement again, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Every time the police break up an occupied camp, there's more people join because of the violence that they use.
We watched the midnight raid that Mayor Bloomberg's people conducted in Zuccotti Park, where they cleared the park. I have been amazed and I guess really heartened by the humanity and the creativity of the people, though, who've been involved in these movements. I love the Occupy Earth that they projected against the Verizon building. I just thought that was a brilliant stroke. If we can't have the park, then we're going to occupy a building by spraying light on the side of it, just by using.
Which I'm sure they're going to make illegal some way.
Well, the police want to make videoing illegal, and we now know why that is because they don't want to things.
But they can't stop.
But I do think this is energizing the movement in a new way. Every time that I think it's losing steam because winter's coming and it would be hard to occupy, it seems like the people who are supporting the 1%, the police officials who are really backing the status quo, are just doing these actions that scare people to the point where they say, wait a minute, I thought we did have some rights here.
You know, somebody stopped me today, and so if you're going to talk about this on the show tonight, you should bring up just about where has the attitude of the police officers gone?
Right.
What's going on out there? Do we need to reevaluate how we're training police officers? These are the things they're doing.
I have been contacting some of my old friends in the community policing movement, and I'm arguing that it's time for us to issue a sort of manifesto. We lost the battle. We lost the battle about 10 years ago when 911 occurred, because what happened is that all too often it meant that everything went into high-tech, riot gear, militarized policing. to protect communities. We all know that community policing is a far better strategy, but in that era when everybody was so terrified by terrorism, it seemed we were willing to give up all of our civil rights just to be safe. And unfortunately, the battle for the heart and mind of policing, I think that battle was lost, and we have to get it back.
Absolutely. I think we'll see it every day on YouTube when something like this happens.
It's a sort of perfect segue into the guest that we have. We're going to take up the bulk of our the remaining time here in our hour. We are joined first by Rena Risper of the New Citizens Press, and it has long been your commitment to really try to create peace in the community, to make sure that we live in a peaceful community. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about the new event and what sparked it and what's coming up here.
Well, I would like to also introduce you to Brandon Armstrong, if you can see him, and also Perm Page, who's a local rapper. Yeah, that's Perm Page.
He's on the cover of New Citizens Press.
You know, he's very famous. We're all just like shaking by sitting next to him. And then Brandon is a local businessman, and he does great at what he does. He's a marketer, and he also creates T-shirts and does all kinds of what I would say I call it maniac marketing. So
little guerrilla marketing going on.
Yep.
Yeah. His marketing is not really guerrilla marketing. I think that the millennials have maniac marketing.
Maybe.
I think that maniac marketing would consist of putting something on a shirt that you really wouldn't normally see on a shirt, like a date of death and a birth. That to me is maniac marketing. It takes you, my sociological mind has to put everything into a box, and there's nothing really that anyone is doing right now to, socialize what's going on in certain demographics right now. And that whole way of marketing the death of
public awareness.
Someone is actually a public awareness campaign that's being waged by a community that's saying, hey, look, this is what happened. And I oftentimes find that it is shocking. It's very shocking to have to go through that. And here in Lansing, as you well know, we have been seeing a lot more deaths due to violence. And long time advocate of nonviolent activities and putting it out there. Have always been interviewing parents of victims, and it's just awful.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing. Rena, what was the most recent incident that really has galvanized a decision to go forward and take more direct action?
Well, the most recent incident has been the death of Ignacio Notch Bermudez. I just knew him by Notch. He was like was like Madonna Notch. And on November 10th, he was murdered, and I'll let Brendan and Perm was actually there that evening, and so he's going to talk more about that. But I wanted to, on my end, talk about why I decided to work with Brendan and Perm, because we don't usually work in the same. We're not in the same social circle. I mean, I'm in their social circle when I come to take pictures for the newspaper, but I've really created a great friendship and a great love. I get like all misty for the both of them. They're like, my family now. And Brendan came to me and he said, you're the only one that can help, me do this. I need you. And I'm looking at him like, I don't even know you guys, and not only that, we don't really get along, I think. So it's like, and he was like, we're going to put all of that aside. And I'm thinking, wow, we're going to put all of that aside and we're going to get down to business because I know you could help me. And I tell you what, Brendan and I put our heads together and there's 5 members that originally started Team Lansing.
Okay.
It's called Together Everyone Achieves More.
TEAM is Together Everyone Achieves More.
Together Everyone Achieves More. So it's
good acronym.
the
maniac
maniac
marketer.
marketer. So it's Brandon Armstrong, Sam Perez, Perm, Justin Preston, and Rena Risper.
Okay.
And I want to make that really clear because as we move on, I know that there's going to be a lot of other things that pop up that
Sure.
are not going to really be a part of what our main goal is, which is to have this rally, which will be our first event, and it'll be on November 26th from 12 to 3
At the Capitol.
on the Capitol steps, and that was amazing too, how quickly that all came together. And we are going to have speakers, Pastor Tracy Edmond from Walk in Truth Ministries. We're going to have Carol Wood is going to be speaking.
Oh, good. Good.
And John Edmond is going to be speaking. He's going to be on your show later on today. His daughter Amaya was born last year. And Stacy Lewis, whose sister died. And as a result of her sister dying and not having insurance, she started Stacy Lewis State Farm Insurance Agency.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to have Men Making a Difference, which is a group that actually does an amazing job of mentoring young people. Emma, which is Empower, Motivate, and Mentor Adolescents. We're going to have her speak. And Arrow, she's going to talk about Ban the Box a little bit, because I truly believe that a lot of violence has to do with the fact that ex-felons can't find a job.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how are you to find a job if you have, a box that automatically excludes you from even getting a resume read?
We incarcerate the largest percentage of the population of any nation on earth, 2.2 million right now. Anybody who has that kind of record is basically excluded from the workforce, even though we keep talking about the importance of giving people a second chance and giving them an opportunity to come out of prison and do well for themselves. That it's almost prohibitive. No, it's a huge issue. I'm glad to see somebody tackling that, because it's especially in a time of tight times. It's hard enough to get a job.
It's an amazing issue. Not only that, Bonnie, we have to really consider that if we can't find jobs, how are we going to go about training people? Okay, so we're not training them because we don't have any money. So why don't we set up something such that we can provide individuals with information about starting their own business? How about, some type of seminar for ex-felons to start their own business that they actually can get into if there isn't any, parameters around that. But that's basically what the rally is going to be about, just providing people with information. Perm is going to be speaking. And basically, I mean, it's time for the violence to stop. And with each person who passes away, the more and more we're getting fed up with it. And it's time for it to stop. And it's time for us to try, as a collective, to try to figure out what the problem is.
Perm, could you tell me what happened that night you were there? And I have not heard from anybody who was in the area that evening. What happened?
What happened was, first of all, it happened at an event that we throw. Now, a lot of people want to categorize this as a hip hop event, and right off the bat, when you say a hip hop event, people think that type of stuff follows that crowd. But this particular hip hop event we throw was based around positivity, diversity. It's a totally different type of hip hop event than any other type of hip hop event that you would normally see. Anyway,
this was down at the Loft.
Yes, it was at the Loft, and Notch was attending, and
he's a local promoter.
The local promoter as well, a very good friend of mine, basically like a brother to me. Really basically an inspiration for me to even get involved in throwing events, and one of my biggest supporters as an artist, etc. He was attending the event, and the gentleman who was accused of this was also attending. And based from everything I heard, they was having a argument. They had words. The guy left. Notch was still in the building even after I left, and I'm the promoter that threw the event. So we had already counted the money, split everything up. Notch was still in the building because his sister-in-law works there.
Oh.
She's the bartender, so he was waiting for her. A little bit after we exit the building, we were parked across the street at the Lansing Center, right across the street from the Nut House. We get in our car, we get ready to leave. We hear shots. So we pull up, and my friend sees that it's notching. We hop out, we call the ambulance, and basically it all stemmed from an argument. I was just talking to Brandon about this, how, people are letting their pride cause them to do stupid stuff. Because if this guy would have thought about, even if he would have did the selfish thing, it would have been the best thing for him to do for him would have been to just go home. He had already left the building approximately 15 to 20 minutes before now. The bar was closed. There was nobody there but friends and family and employees. There was nobody left. Like, the party was completely over with. So for him to wait outside, he had to be very upset.
It was basically an execution at that point.
It was an assassination. And it was people that was there with Notch, that was right there with him. I was across the street, and I don't see very well. So, but from all the witness information that I was told, that when the guy came up, there was no words, there was no, it wasn't a chance for it to talk it out he already had his mind made up what he was going to do. He did it, and then he ran off. Yeah.
Reno, one of the challenges, and I know this from when I did a lot of work with police, is that we all too often talk about crime in the aggregate, but each incident of violence has its own dynamic.
It does.
There's a difference between being at home at night and having a family dispute break out, and having a domestic violence or an incident of child abuse has a different dynamic. Somebody who's stalking somebody and rapes them in an alley is different than an acquaintance rape. Is different. What we have to do, though, is figure out what can we as a culture do to interrupt this whole cycle.
And that's what the most interesting part is. And what I figure is that we need to survey people and get them to the right resources. That's the only thing that we can do. There are kids who are getting in trouble because maybe they have psychological problems. Then there are kids who are getting in trouble because maybe their father's in prison, or their kid, or their mother's a drug addict, or whatever your issue is. There's all different kinds of ways that you need to solve the issue. We're not going to be able to create solutions out of the Stop the Violence rally for everyone. But what we want to do is we want to let people that we stand together as a community to make Lansing a better place and to provide resources for individuals. And this is not the last thing that we're going to do. So often I've been involved in, working with other people, and, as soon as that one event is over, they don't want to have another event. I'm planning on talking to Sam Perez and maybe working with him to, expand his car show out to have, and we don't work together. I don't work and they don't work together. So we need to get together as people and individuals. All socioeconomic classes, races, colors, and creeds need to come together to really put this issue on the table. And we need to actually start speaking about the violence and what we're going to do as people to solve it.
Sometimes I maybe state the obvious, but growing up, I saw a lot of fights, maybe was involved in some. But has something dramatically changed because of guns, do you think? We'd fight probably over something like that. Somebody might get broken nose, but they're not dead.
Right. I think it definitely has changed a lot. I feel like a lot of people that would have just accepted the fact that, like, if you take it back to the times you're talking about, if you had an argument with somebody and he was bigger than you and stronger than you, then you probably would have just allowed that to be a peaceful situation. Like, you would just let it go. But now people want to go, because they want to go get their gun. Yeah. It's an excellent equalizer. They're using them like they don't have to take that hit to their pride. They don't have to swallow their pride. But what they're not thinking about is the next step. Because after you do that, you can't go home to your family. You can't have Christmas, and now it's Thanksgiving coming up. He can't eat turkey. you ruin your life too. So I guess what you have to weigh the option is like, was it worth it? Was it worth it for you to feel? I mean, like, I think people have to start being honest. Like, just be what you are. So people are so caught up in protecting the image that they're not even genuinely. They're not because if you was genuinely a bad guy like that, you would have did it and walked away. You would have did it in Frank Lucas style and just sat down and finished your turkey sandwich. You know what I mean? Like, you wouldn't have to run. I mean, you would just, people would just protect their images. It's just a facade. Like, I'm getting so, that's what my motivation is. Like, I'm so tired of people not being authentic with who they really are. And at the same time, I'm also tired of like people, how the media, like you spoke on this, you touched on this earlier, how the media twists the facts and how they paint us in
There's a
certain
lot of
light.
stereotyping that goes on. The minute that you can attach the word hip hop to it, all
Right,
of a sudden
right.
it's as if you're painting a specific picture.
And that's what got me motivated to get involved because I'm generally a person, like I've always known the world is crazy and it's messed up, but I always thought like, what could I do? You know what I'm saying? I'm just one person, like, but now I feel like I gotta try to do something. I gotta try to do whatever I can.
You're listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing. Brandon?
Brandon.
I want to make sure I got it right. One of the things, part of the dynamic is that this is not something that you see women do to each other. I mean, this is not a typically female crime. It's men who feel that they have been dissed by somebody, disrespected by somebody, and there's something in that male psyche that says, I have to protect my honor. And it goes all the way back to the old days of dueling, where, you would slap the other guy with gloves and then meet out on the field the next day with firearms and go at each other. That's the part that I think women like me sometimes have a hard time understanding.
Mhm.
Where does that come from, and how can we address that issue? How can we persuade men that that's not the way you would want to settle those disputes?
There's not really a definite answer for that. It's just a evolution of man. That's just how it is now. When like he was saying earlier, when you're younger and you duke it out, and then you might lose, but then you come back and duke it out again and try again. It's not like that now. Like people, like Perm was saying, the egos are ridiculous. And people just need to set that aside.
And I would like to add too that that's changing. Women are the 1st ones now to scrap at a party. But
But they don't grab guns and shoot each other yet.
They don't grab guns and shoot each other yet, but
No.
they're the first ones to become disruptive now. And what makes it even more interesting for me is that it doesn't like socioeconomic class
Oh,
now.
no.
It doesn't even like you don't even have there's some women who just don't have any class anymore. And they will just go and just start pulling hair and fighting over nothing. And like Perm said, it's all about ego and it's all about putting on a facade. And if somebody has something a little bit more than you, or if or you're better at something, or if they want something that you have, why not put them in the place where you're embarrassing them to the point where you have diminished them? So it's a really interesting space to be in right now. Really interesting space.
As I used to say to my friend, the police chief in Oklahoma, you don't hear very often about the drive-by stabbing. And one of the things that I think we do have to think about is how we're going to get the guns out of the hands of people. If people want to have a gun at home and because they hunt deer, I mean, it's that season of the year, or they've got a gun in the bedroom in case somebody's crawling in the bedroom window, that's different than having a gun on you. And I think that is the challenge. Is there a role for the community in disarming people on the street?
It'll never effectively. I don't think it'll ever happen.
No.
I think it's bigger than gun control. It's bigger than that because violence doesn't have to happen with a gun. It can be kids being bullied at school.
Yeah.
It can be anything like that. It doesn't. The gun issues are going to be around for the rest of time.
But the lethality is a whole bunch different if there's a gun involved, I suppose. I mean, it's hard to get them to sit still where you poison them.
Yeah.
I mean, just the dynamics of the crime. If we could get the guns out of the hands of people on the street, it would seem that would be part of the solution. Is there any hope that we can do that?
I'm not really sure we can get the guns out of the hands of people who are on the street because they're put there for a reason. I have all these conspiracy theories. They're put there for a reason, and if you look at the statistics, who's killing who? So you have to consider.
There's a new book that just came out that challenges the wisdom that it was dealing with disorder back in the William Bratton era in New York City that brought down the violence rate. They said it was actually targeting guns. They said that there was a lot of effort to get the guns out of the hands of young people, and that was one of the
Yeah,
biggest
they were
success
paying
stories.
for them, and they had where you can go into the. I was probably living there during that time. You could go into the police station without getting arrested, and just drop off the guns to
No questions asked.
no questions asked. Right. So that's something interesting that maybe the city of Lansing might want to look into. No questions asked.
Pearl and Brandon, well, you've got. Is it time for some of the more mature people in the community to come together and do work across different groups? I mean, is that what we're seeing with team? It's people who might not normally know each other or interact with each other, trying to share ideas and come up with the best ones.
It's basically our generation's responsibility.
Okay.
You know, we can't push it off on anyone else. It's our time to take control and show these young kids what's right and what's wrong. We can't sit back and allow this to keep happening to our city. And I know personally I'm fed up with it. And I know 100 other people that are fed up with it. And they all know 100 people that are fed up with it. So, you know, that's one of the big things about this Team Lansing is just basically gathering everyone together to stand together as one voice saying we're all fed up with this. I don't I don't have any answers. You know, I don't know exactly what to do, but I know that enough people get together. We're going to have some, you know, somebody's going to know a direction to take it and what needs to be done. I just know I'm sick of, putting my friends on t-shirts.
Right.
That's the primary
We don't
reason.
need to lose anybody else.
No.
Perm, what's your situation? What is your role going to be at the event? And that's going to be Saturday from noon to 3 at the Capitol?
Yeah, Saturday from noon to 3. I mean, what my role is to generally help to mobilize people. Like she mentioned earlier, I do music. I'm pretty well known in the community. I have a past. I've also like been on a more positive note. Like I mentioned to you earlier, the event we was doing, it's called State of the Union. It's called that because it's about creating unity in the state through hip hop. So we've already been doing that. Like it's nothing new. I've been speaking to kids at Camp Highfields for a while, etc. Like we've been on that note. It's just like you said, everybody coming together and doing their part. I never wanted. What I don't want anybody to do is look at me like as a preacher or a politician, or I think that the words will have the best effect if they look at me. I'm just like you. I'm just like them. I'm just a person that just lost a good friend, and I'm trying to help prevent somebody else from having that same experience because it's not fun. I lost a good friend while I was doing something positive in the community and watched the media take it and paint it as something negative. And at the same time that I lost a friend, I lost the right to do it. I can't do it like the law's not letting us do it no more. So we can't provide that service that we provide to the community. And at the same time, that's my job. So I lost my job. I lost my friend. I lost the ability to provide something positive that I was providing every month for the people that do this hip hop to have a chance to express themselves and network in a positive. We've been doing State of the Union since 2009. We've never had a fist fight. So it's just crazy.
It
like
had
how
nothing to do with your event.
Right. It was somebody with a grudge and I mean that's where I come in. It's just speaking, helping to mobilize my community who might not, you spoke to them earlier, you spoke on them earlier, like they might not necessarily have a vested interest in coming out to this, but if I could say a few words and I could, make people see or understand why they should get involved, that's my goal. You know what I'm saying? Like he said, we don't have all the answers. Somebody at the greatest mind might be sitting at home right now thinking, and we might just be the people that spark them to be motivated to come out and share that idea that they have.
We need as many people on those Capitol steps as we can get, and we need people from all over the community, all over the city of Lansing who are really, I mean, this is a concern because it speaks to to the issue that affects the whole community. I was once the director of the Victims in the Media program, and there was a case one of the awards that we gave out, and it was a series of articles called Path of the Bullet, and the subtitle was How One 22-cent Bullet Cost Our Community $1 million. And you think, what do you mean $1 million? How could that cost $1 million? When you look at what the impact of a death like this has, the criminal justice system gets engaged. Somebody's going to end up doing time for this. It costs in Michigan $35,000 a year to keep somebody behind bars. The medical system gets involved. The medical system has to respond. So often there are all these costs associated with that. Your career is threatened as a result of this because of the negative publicity that it created. It robs you of that opportunity to make a living. I mean, the consequences for the community are enormous. The ripple effect. It affects the entire community, and the entire community really has to come together to stand together.
I think you're right, Bonnie. And I think one of the things that too often this becomes a race issue.
Oh, yeah.
And hip hop now is sort of this polite way of saying, "Ooh, I know what that means."
Right.
And it's really not a race issue anymore. It's way beyond race anymore. It's about people killing each other. We're all humans.
And the entire community is affected. Yep. Rena, you brought some other guests with you too, and I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to introduce them and bring them into our conversation. We're going to be doubling up here all over.
Doubling up.
Bill is going to donate his microphone here. Who is joining us here at the mic?
This is John Edmond. His daughter is Amaya Edmond. He's going to speak a little bit too.
You can tell us why it is that you're getting involved and what you hope this event will do.
Well, I've been involved in the community since last year. It's been a little over a year. We've had several marches. We've had a march, first of all, in the Baker Denora community area, and then we had one shortly after August over in the Wainwright area. And what we're going to do is we're going to hit each side of Lansing. North side, south side, east side, west side. And I've been working with the Lansing Police Department, and they have a program called Keep the Peace, Stop the Silence. And peace means police enforcement and community engagement. I was approached by Captain Ray Hall of the Homicide Division after I spoke at my daughter's funeral, because I just had a lot of passion about it. And I promised my daughter while she laid there dead last July that I was going to speak out on her behalf, because she didn't deserve what happened to her. And I also feel that this community needs to come together, not when somebody dies, but I mean, we need to join hands all the time.
Absolutely.
Not just when somebody passes that we know or somebody else knows. In my personal opinion, I really feel that nobody really wants to get involved until it happens to somebody that they know, or if it happens to somebody that they live with. It shouldn't be that way. I've been hitting the streets since my daughter passed away, and not to take away from what this rally is about, but we've been having marches. We had 2 marches, and we rarely seen people that were out there. The last march that I had, I invited homicide victims' families. Zachary Chapman, when I was working at Highfields as a juvenile counselor, he was one of my kids, and he was stabbed to death a couple months before my daughter got shot. And so I invited his family out there. I invited Wesley Glasgow, the 16-year-old boy that lost his life a couple days before Christmas. I went to high school with his mother, Africa Graves. And we also grew up together in the same neighborhood. So that really touched me. And just to see 2 kids lose their lives, it just really burned me up. And the community should have been on fire. I did a lot of research on the city of Oakland, California. And every time they have a homicide, which their homicide rate is very high, they are out in the streets marching, and it doesn't matter. The whole thing about Lansing is this don't want to be a snitch thing. I've been speaking out against that. That's what the Keep the Peace, Stop the Silence thing is about.
That's what Stop the Silence.
And I've been going to Gardner Middle School. I've been going to Sexton High School. I've been all over Lansing speaking out against this whole code of the streets thing. Because that's what happened in my daughter's case. For the first 2.5 to 3 months, we didn't know anything. And this is a 7-year-old child. So I was disgusted with the city of Lansing that nobody came forward with that type of information. Now, if it was somebody else's child, I mean, you would be hitting the pavement. And I'm very passionate about that. And then when it happened to Wesley, I'm like thinking to myself, oh my God, it's happening again. So what is Lansing gonna do? So when I get out there and I speak, I'm speaking from the heart because I don't want this to happen to anybody else. But you know what? Like these guys said, we don't have the answers. And you know what? Unfortunately, it's going to happen again. And this is what I've been speaking out to Lansing about is that when it happens again, be prepared. Be prepared because you're going to want people to help you. See, we got to come together as a people now. Now we got all these different organizations in place. We need to come together as one. And I know how people feel about the police, and you guys talked about that. And I just wanted to briefly touch on that. I didn't get along with the police department. I had flaws in my life. I'm not perfect, but I tell you what, when my daughter was killed, I had a decision to make. First, I gave praise and honor to God because I needed Him, and when I asked Him to help me, soon after that, I started getting all these phone calls, and that's when the police came. The police offered as much help to me as I did to them.
Yes.
We were a team at that point.
I have great respect for Ray Hall. I think he's one of the most remarkable officers in the department. And I think that what we had previously in the previous era where we had officers stationed in neighborhoods, it gave people an opportunity to talk to police without having to make it a formal request where they have to call 911 and they're afraid their name goes in a database, or where they're seen going to a police department and they're perceived as snitching on somebody. One of the things that was so wonderful about community policing with community-based officers is people could share information casually. Just stop by on the street as they walk by and share a lot of information. And I think we've got to get back to that. I know it's rough and tough times when the departments face layoffs and they don't have as many officers to spare, but that collaboration between police and community is absolutely essential.
And that's what I stressed out, and that's what I stressed in the first month or so, because my whole thing with the snitching thing, when I spoke to Ray specifically, I said, Ray, it's things that you guys have to understand that the reasons why you're not getting information is because the way you treat the people in the community. Yeah. You know, I said it's got to be something that has to come along with it. You can't just expect people to give you information just based off that. And you know how people talk about the whole snitching thing. I want to make this clear. I want to make this very clear. If you have information that's pertinent to a homicide, it's not snitching. What people have to understand, the true definition of snitching, if you don't understand what that means, you can't associate that with a homicide. Because now you have people like the Edmond family that are looking and searching for justice. And somebody may have an answer, but they don't want to get involved because it's not them. It's not their family. So we got to break that mentality, and we got to start with the heart. We got to go back to people's hearts. And that's why I have this compassion. And I told my daughter I will never let her die in vain. So I've been given opportunity after opportunity to work with Rena. She was one of the first reporters that did a story in her newspaper about Amaya. And it just touched the community. Everybody in the community at one point seemed like they came together, and then after a while it just kind of went away. Well, it can't happen like that. So we need more people from the community to come out. Like I reached out to those other victims' families, and they were still torn.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's a lot of things that I would love to express about my daughter's case that I can't because it's in the court system now. So I want people to understand the importance of it before it happens.
Well, that's what I want to see. I want to see people speaking out too before it happens. It's important to get justice afterwards, but it's certainly important for everybody to be able to prevent things from happening as well. Listening to WLNZ 89.7 here in Lansing. Marina, can you introduce to the next guest that you have brought with you?
Yes, I can. This is Shantae Gates, and she's going to tell us a little bit about how she grew up and how she moved through it.
Well, I don't really have a lot of time to share my story. I'm going to share my story at the rally from 12 to 3. But for time's sake, I do want to say that I was I wasn't on the side of shooting anybody, or nobody close to me ever got shot or killed. But when I was younger, I was one of those violent people. The ones walking around carrying a gun, robbing, stealing, breaking. All of that. And it started in the home. You know, and I believe that good behavior starts in the home. Like these grown men that's murdering now, it didn't start all of a sudden when they got older. I believe it starts in the home when they're younger. Either somebody has hurt them, maybe they were called names or neglected, you know, um, nobody's there for them. So I believe, how kids are always told, be seen or be quiet, don't talk so then they have to hold a lot of stuff inside. And then, as they grow up, they carry all this inside of them, this unforgiveness and stuff and everything. And then, when something happens, then it's like boom, they let it all out. But for me, um, I came out of that only through being saved by Christ Jesus, giving myself over to the Lord. I tried to come out of it a lot of other times, but without Him, I couldn't do it on my own. Okay,
Who brought
because
you to that? How did you get involved?
with
How were you saved?
how was I saved? Well, I had a lot of family praying for me. Always, my mother's a pastor, my dad, my sisters, my mother. I believe that I always had somebody praying for me. You know, what it was is the devil makes you believe that you're a certain type of person. What he does is he uses your situation and your circumstances and things that you go through in your past or your life since you were a kid, and he uses that, tricking you, deceiving you, cunning you to make you react and do things, make you feel like you're not worthy, make you feel like, oh, nobody cares about you, and things like that, and then you walk around with unforgiveness. And the only way that you can get rid of a lot of that stuff and holding in a lot of animosity is you have to let it go. And the only way you're going to let it go is to give your life over to Christ, to God. That's the only way. He says, my people perish from a lack of knowledge. That's because they're not knowledgeable about what the devil does. The devil uses us without us even knowing. He like he plays us like puppets. Because we don't have that knowledge of God to be able to use against the devil to tell him back up. Get off of me. And when I finally found God, I was able to find forgiveness in my heart for a lot of people who have hurt me, who wasn't there for me, that I felt neglected.
Rena, there's an enormous job here. I mean,
There is an enormous job, Bonnie. I'm telling you, we have an enormous job. And for anyone who says that we can solve all these issues in one day, we can't.
If there were simple answers, we'd have done them.
But I believe that if we begin to mix everybody together with a common understanding of love and forgiveness and just having the opportunity. I mean, I can't even tell you how much I love Brendan. I mean, he just, every time I see him, I'm like squeezing him. And before I would have been like, oh my gosh, that guy over there, so I mean, and Perm, forget it. I'm just always squeezing him too because, and I just have really through this whole thing have just met some really amazing people.
There's an enormous amount of healing that has to happen for the hurt that's already occurred in the community.
And that's just plain old forgiveness. It's just plain getting over it and moving. It's called moving through. It's called, making your mind. And, I was talking to John and I was saying, well, we're each, 4 years ago, more people weren't involved, and 6 years ago, and when was your father murdered?
Minette,
Minette Jackson. Her father was murdered in 1993, and did our parents bring us out to rally for Mr. Johnson when he was murdered? So it's now we're the new millennials. What can I say? Right. We're trying to. We're really trying to focus on what our problems are now because it's not, our, my mother's mother or something. It's our friends. It's our sisters.
Minette, and part of your goal, I'm assuming, is you don't want other people to go through what you've gone through.
No, it's been a long 18 years. I mean, everyone say, that you have to accept and be strong and move on, but I don't accept it. I don't accept that a person can take someone's life and, well, what they trying to do is trying to get her out in December. She's trying to get out. And my whole thing is with that is that I don't sit well with that because she murdered someone. You murder someone, your life need to be taken. Period. As far as they say that she's being a good inmate, I don't accept that because I know her personally. The lawyer, the prosecutor, the judges, the inmates, they know her what she is there. But I know her personally. She's very evil and conniving. And as far as murder goes, I think as people, we keep accepting. When I mean accepting, we go to a funeral, the preachers preach, and they tell us about stop the violence, don't do this, don't do that. But are we really listening to it? Are we really standing up and really taking what he said? No, we're not. We leave up out the church, go back doing the same thing again. And that's the problem. We are accepting it. I don't accept it at all.
Being able, when the community stands up and says, we just won't take this anymore, that we need a system that works for us, then things do start to change. I think we're on the cusp of a lot of that.
And as far as the healing goes, my hole is still open.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's closed a little bit more.
I still cry. I still think about my father every day. It's been 18 years. My two children that have an 18-year-old, 12-year-old, they have cried to me just recently about they don't even know their grandfather. They gonna never know him. And that's hurting to me because as we growing up, we know about grandfathers and grandmothers, and we need that. But now, my children ain't gonna never have that ever.
But we have made many strides, though.
We're getting there, Rena.
Minette and I have made strides. I mean, when I met Minette, I have kept in contact with her. I visit her. What's up, Minette? How you feeling? And I do that to almost all of the people that I meet when, or if I have a program, there's an opportunity for them to speak. And this is like becoming my new family, kind of, sort of. And it's a really odd place for me to be in, but I don't know. It's just,
I'm really glad to see that the New Citizens Press is playing, I think, a crucial role in being able to tell your daughter Amaya's story and being able to tell stories in the community, because we need those stories told for people to understand. I mean, that's how you're going to be able to bring people together and get them together before more hurt is imposed on the community. Tell us a little bit about what else is going to happen at the rally, what people need to know.
Well, people need to know that we're going to do it regardless of weather. If you can sit outside in a football game, you can come to a rally. I really don't, want any excuses. If, no matter what, crime will happen wherever. You can be in the snow, it could be hot, it could be whenever. The time is now, and we want people to come out and support us. We will have speakers from 12 to 3. We're going to have a little bit of music. Ms. Reality will be performing. We also have Irma Menchacha. She's coming from Grand Valley State. When she heard, I couldn't get anyone from MSU, but but Grand Valley State was like, we're coming. We're going to do a thing on social justice. Yes, and there'll be the naysayers. And you know what? I'm going to brush them off. Yeah. If I know someone who needs to work with John Edmond, I'm going to send them to John Edmond. If I know a young guy that needs, some support because he's a great artist, I'm going to send him to Brendan. If I know one who's got some really nice beats and can get it down pat and whatever they do on the ones and twos, I'm going to send them to Perm. And now I know that they would be willing to mentor. And I know that they would be willing to mentor. And I know somebody who, when I get Minette to the point where she actually will go to talk to somebody, because I've been talking to her for a year, and you know what? I'm not giving up on her.
I know you won't.
I'm not giving up.
You tracked her down.
I track her down. I don't care where she is. And if she's in a bad mood, I'm like, I don't care. No excuses, right?
Right.
And I get you like back together quick, fast, and in a hurry. So
Well, we need to remind everybody that it's going to be noon to 3 o'clock on the steps of the Capitol, and it is the 26th, which is this coming Saturday.
This coming Saturday.
And this is for everybody in the community. We thank you very much. Maybe we can get a wrap up on Monday from you on the next Monday's show and find out how the rally went. Because I know you, Rita, this is just the beginning.
Yes, this is just the beginning. But it's only the beginning because I have all of these wonderful people who actually have a pure heart.
Thank you very much. And tune back in on next Monday night for Lansing Online News Radio. And make sure to check us out online as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bonnie.
Perfect timing. Now I have to hit a couple buttons.